Lila Carter, a seasoned flight attendant, storms down the aisle of Flight 392, glaring at a black woman, Naomi Brooks, in first class, her sleek briefcase pristine. Convinced her ticket's fake, Lila snaps, "Get off now!" Naomi, poised, steps into the jetway as passengers whisper. Lila smirks, job done, until a sleek black car rolls up outside, whisking Naomi away. Lila assumes she's nabbed a fraud, blind to how this moment will torch her career. What's Naomi plotting as that car speeds off? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. If you stand for justice kicking prejudice to the curb, hit like and subscribe for more epic showdowns. Lila Carter leaned against the galley counter of Flight 392, the plane still humming at the gate in Atlanta, a smirk tugging at her lips as she replayed the scene in her head. That black woman, Naomi Brooks, with her fancy briefcase and cool as ice, stare, had slinked off the jetway like a scolded kid after Lila called her bluff. Fake ticket. Obvious as daylight, she thought, sipping lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup. 20 years working these skies, and she could spot a grifter from a mile high. She grabbed the intercom mic, her voice crackling through the cabin. "Folks, slight delay while we sort some paperwork. Sit tight." Passengers groaned, but Lila didn't care. Her chest puffed with the thrill of being right. She fished her phone from her apron pocket and tapped a quick text to her buddy Jake, a gate agent down at Terminal C. Caught some uppity chick trying to scam first class, booted her before takeoff. These types think they own the place. She hit send, chuckling as she pictured Jake's grin. Outside, rain streaked the tarmac, blurring the lights of the black car that had peeled away with Naomi inside. Probably cops hauling her off, Lila mused, brushing a strand of graying blonde hair from her sweaty forehead. Good riddance. Meanwhile, 2 miles away, Naomi Brooks sat in the back of that sleek sedan, her tailored blazer dry despite the downpour. She'd walked through. Her fingers danced across her phone screen, drafting an email with a subject line that glowed in the dim light. Incident report, Flight 392. She typed with surgical precision, her words sharp and unyielding, detailing every second of Lila's barked orders, the smug tilt of her head, the way she'd assumed Naomi didn't belong. Her driver, a broad-shouldered man named Terrence, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You okay, Ms. Brooks?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Naomi's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "I'm fine, Terrence. Just setting things in motion." She hit send, the email pinging off to a private server, and leaned back, her dark eyes glinting with purpose Lila couldn't fathom. Back on the plane, the cabin buzzed with restless chatter as passengers shuffled in their seats. Lila strutted down the aisle, her navy skirt swishing, checking seatbelts with a practiced eye. A teenage kid in row 12, Darius, leaned into the aisle, his hoodie pulled tight over his braids. "Yo, why'd you kick that lady off?" he asked, his tone sharp enough to slice through the hum of the engines. Lila froze mid-step, her jaw tightening as she turned to face him. "Mind your business, kid," she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. Darius didn't flinch, his brown eyes locking onto hers. "Looked like racism to me." She wasn't bothering nobody. The word hit Lila like a slap, but she didn't back down. "You want to join her? Keep talking," she said, pointing a manicured finger at the jetway door. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, a woman in a red coat clutching, her purse tighter, a guy in a baseball cap pretending to sleep. Darius smirked, unbuckling his seatbelt with a slow, deliberate click. "Aight, I'll walk." He stood, slinging his backpack over his shoulder, and sauntered off the plane, leaving a ripple of murmurs in his wake. Lila's pulse raced, but she forced a tight smile, brushing it off. Kids these days, always looking for a fight. She didn't see the girl in row 14, a college student with a buzz cut and a nose ring, discreetly filming the whole exchange on her phone. The video captured Lila's sneer, Darius's defiance, the uneasy glances of the cabin, all framed by the shaky hum of the aircraft. By the time Lila returned to the galley, smugly pouring herself another coffee, that clip was uploading to X, tagged with Fresh Flight 392 and Fresh Justice for Naomi. Within minutes, it spread like wildfire, racking up thousands of views as comments poured in. "This is disgusting. Airline needs to fire her. Who was that woman? Lila's phone buzzed in her pocket and she pulled it out, expecting Jake's reply. Instead, it was a call from her supervisor, Carl, his gravelly voice cutting through the static. Lila, what the hell's going on up there? I've got a complaint about you tossing some lady off the plane, and now there's a video blowing up online. You're making us look bad. Lila rolled her eyes, leaning against the counter as she swirled her coffee. Relax, Carl. She had a fake ticket. I handled it. That kid was just stirring trouble. You know how these people are, always playing the victim. Carl's sigh crackled through the line, heavy with exasperation. Just keep your head down, Lila. We're boarding the last stragglers now. Don't give me more headaches. She hung up, tossing the phone onto the counter with a clatter, her smirk widening. Handled it, she thought, picturing Naomi in handcuffs somewhere, maybe a holding cell with flickering lights. She'd seen plenty of passengers try to pull fast ones over the years, sneaking into first class with sob stories or forged boarding passes. This one was no different, just louder about it. The engines roared as the plane finally pushed back from the gate, and Lila adjusted her scarf, feeling the familiar jolt of takeoff. She dodged Carl's wrath, kept her cool, and sent that troublemaker packing. Another day, another win. But across town, Naomi's sedan pulled into an underground garage beneath a glass-walled office tower. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the concrete, and rode a private elevator to the 40th floor. The doors opened to a sprawling suite, walls lined with awards and photos of her shaking hands with senators, mayors, CEOs. Her assistant, a wiry man named Kevin, greeted her with a tablet in hand. The email's sent, Ms. Brooks. Legal's already drafting a follow-up. And that video? It's at 50,000 views. Naomi nodded, setting her briefcase on a mahogany desk. Good. Let it spread. We're just getting started. She sank into a leather chair, her posture regal, and pulled up the video on her own screen. There was Lila, all bluster and bile, barking at Darius like he was dirt under her shoe. Naomi's jaw tightened, but her face stayed composed, a mask of steel forged over decades of battles just like this. She'd faced worse, far worse, clawing her way up from nothing to the top of Horizon Airlines. This wasn't about one flight attendant's tantrum. It was about the rot she'd let fester too long in her own company. Lila thought she'd won by kicking her off that plane, but Naomi knew better. This was war, and Lila didn't even know the battlefield existed yet. Back in the sky, Flight 392 leveled off at 30,000 feet, the cabin lights dimming as passengers settled in. Lila moved through her routine, handing out peanuts and sodas with a plastic smile, her mind already on the cold beer waiting for her at the crew hotel in Chicago. She caught a few sideways glances from passengers, probably still buzzing about the jetway drama, but she shrugged it off. They'd forget by landing. They always did. Her phone buzzed again as she ducked into the galley, this time Jake's reply lighting up the screen. LOL, you showed her. These clowns never learn. She grinned, typing back, right? Bet she's crying to some lawyer now. Too late. She didn't notice the guy in row 8, a quiet type with glasses and a laptop, refreshing X every few minutes. The video had hit 100,000 views, trending under dark airline racism. Comments were piling up, some tagging Horizon Airlines directly. Is this who you hire? Boycott them. The guy glanced at Lila as she passed, his brow furrowing, but he said nothing, just kept scrolling. She didn't see the storm brewing, didn't hear the whispers starting to echo beyond the plane's aluminum walls. Lila leaned against the galley sink, cracking her knuckles with a satisfied pop. She'd handled Naomi, shut down Darius, and kept Carl off her back. The flight was smooth, her authority intact. She pictured Naomi's face, that infuriating calm as she'd stepped off, and laughed to herself. Probably some nobody with a stolen credit card, she thought, tossing her empty coffee cup into the trash. She'd seen her kind before, always acting bigger than they were. This was her plane, her rules, and she'd enforce them like always. But Naomi wasn't crying to a lawyer. She was sitting in her office, the city skyline sprawling behind her, a chessboard of lights against the dusk. Kevin slid a folder across her desk labeled Carter, Lila, Personnel File. She flipped it open, scanning the pages. her eyes narrowing at the list of past complaints, brushed-off warnings, a pattern of petty power trips. "She's been at this a while," Naomi murmured, her voice like ice over stone. "Time to clean house." She closed the folder, her mind already 3 moves ahead, while Lila soared above, blissfully ignorant that her little victory was the spark about to burn her world to ash. Lila Carter slumped into a cracked vinyl chair at the crew lounge in Chicago O'Hare, her Navy uniform wrinkled from the 6-hour flight. She scrolled X on her phone, smirking at the notifications piling up from that viral video of her tossing. Naomi Brooks off Flight 392. Over 2 million views now, and the comments were a mixed bag, some calling her a hero for keeping order, others screaming she was a monster. She snorted, tossing her phone onto the table with a clatter. "Bunch of keyboard warriors," she muttered, cracking open a can of soda. The lounge TV blared a local news channel, but she barely glanced at it, too busy texting Jake about her big win over that uppity chick and the mouthy kid Darius. What did they expect her to do? Let anyone waltz into first class? Outside, the storm Naomi had ignited was roaring louder than Lila could imagine. By noon, that video hit 5 million views, and protesters swarmed Horizon Airlines ticketing counters at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, waving signs scrawled with "Justice for Naomi" and "Fire the Racist." Their chants echoed through the terminal, a rhythmic thunder that drowned out boarding calls. Passengers waiting for flights craned their necks, some joining in, others snapping pics as the crowd swelled. Naomi's name was on every tongue, a whisper-turned battle cry, but Lila, sipping her cola 1,000 miles away, had no clue why it sounded familiar. Who was this woman stirring up such a fuss? Back in Atlanta, Naomi Brooks stood at a floor-to-ceiling window in her office tower, gazing down at the city's haze. Her phone buzzed with updates from Kevin, her assistant, who'd been tracking the protests' spread. "It's hitting every major hub now, Ms. Brooks. Chicago's next," he said, his voice tight with excitement. Naomi nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a framed photo on her desk, a younger her marching with civil rights legends. She'd fought battles like this before, but this time, it was personal. Lila thought she'd humiliated her, but Naomi was turning that jetway moment into a reckoning. What would Lila do when the tide crashed over her? Lila's supervisor, Carl, stormed into the lounge, his bald head gleaming with sweat as he jabbed a finger at her. "You see this mess? Protesters are clogging check-ins and corporates breathing down my neck. You're off tomorrow, Lila. Mandatory. Cool off before you sink us all." His voice was a growl, but Lila just shrugged, popping a peanut into her mouth. "They'll get over it, Carl. Always do." He stared at her, disbelief etched into his crow's feet, then shook his head and stomped out. She grinned, thinking, a day off sounded like a bonus. Suspension? More like a vacation. Why should she care about a bunch of loudmouths? She ditched the lounge for a dive bar 2 blocks from the airport, the kind with sticky floors and neon signs buzzing in the windows. Settling onto a stool, she ordered a whiskey neat and leaned toward the bartender, a grizzled guy named Pete. "You believe this crap? People crying racism 'cause I did my job," she said, her voice loud enough to turn heads. Pete grunted, wiping a glass with a rag that looked older than him. "Folks love a cause," he said, but Lila wasn't. "Done. It's reverse racism, Pete. They're mad a white lady stood her ground." A guy in a leather jacket at the bar's end perked up, his ear cocked, but Lila didn't notice. He slipped out minutes later, a sly grin on his face as he dialed a number. Who was he calling with her words in his pocket? That night, Lila crashed at a crew motel, snoring under a lumpy comforter, oblivious to the chaos brewing outside. At 3 a.m., a group of shadows crept toward the airport's employee lot where her beat-up sedan sat. Spray cans hissed in the dark red paint streaking across the hood in jagged letters, "Bigot." By morning, the car was a crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape as cops scribbled notes. Lila stumbled out at dawn bleary-eyed and spotted it from across the lot. Her jaw dropped, then she laughed, a harsh bark that echoed off the asphalt. "Kids with too much time," she scoffed, snapping a pic to send Jake. "Check this out. They're scared of me now." Did she really think this was a win? Her phone buzzed as she climbed into a cab, Carl's name flashing again. "Lila, you see the news. They're naming her. Naomi Brooks, some big shot who's been fighting airline discrimination forever. This ain't dying down. His voice, cracked with strain, but Lila rolled her eyes, staring out the cab window at the gray Chicago skyline. So she's got a sob story. Doesn't mean she belonged in first class, she snapped, hanging up before he could argue. The TV in the cab flickered on, the driver flipping to a breaking news segment. Naomi's face filled the screen, poised and powerful, her voice steady as she spoke at a podium. Civil rights icon targeted on Horizon flight. Lila's stomach twisted, just for a second, but she shoved it down. A has-been activist, she thought, smirking again. She'd weathered worse than this. The cab dropped her at a diner near the motel, all chipped formica and grease-stained menus. She slid into a booth, ordering pancakes as the TV above the counter looped that news clip. Naomi's eyes seemed to pierce through the grainy footage, unflinching, a woman who'd stared down bigger bullies than Lila. The waitress, a black woman with tight curls, set the plate down harder than necessary, her gaze icy. "You that flight attendant, huh?" she asked, arms crossed. Lila smirked, cutting into her food. "Yeah, and I'd do it again. She didn't belong up there." The waitress walked away without a word, but the air in the diner shifted, other customers stealing glances. Was Lila too blind to see the walls? Closing in? Naomi, meanwhile, sat in a boardroom with frosted glass walls, her team buzzing around her like hornets. Kevin slid a tablet across the table, the protest footage live streaming from Chicago now. Signs bobbing in the wind outside O'Hare. "They're calling her a relic of the past who won't let go," he said, pointing to a pundit's rant. Online. Naomi's lips twitched, a rare flicker of amusement. Let them talk. They'll see soon enough. She'd spent decades dismantling systems like the one Lila propped up, and this was just another brick to pull loose. How long could Lila keep laughing when the ground started to quake? Lila finished her pancakes, leaving a stingy tip, and stepped into the chilly morning, her breath fogging in the air. She checked X again, the video now at 7 million views, hashtags multiplying like weeds. She scrolled past the hate, latching, onto a few supportive comments, "Stand your ground, Queen," and grinned, her chest swelling. The vandals had run off. Carl was just whining, and the news would move on. She'd won this round, she told herself, strolling back to the motel with her hands in her pockets, the city's hum a dull roar around her. But what was Naomi whispering to those protesters as they rallied under her name? "Hey folks, this story's heating up. Comment number 1 if you think Lila's digging her own grave with that attitude. Or number 2, if you're rooting for Naomi to flip the script. What's your take? Should Lila get a wake-up call or keep crashing? Smash that like button if you're fired up for justice, and subscribe so you don't miss Naomi's next move. How far will this backlash go? Will Lila's smirk hold when the whole world's watching? Stick around to find out what hits her next. Lila Carter swaggered back into the crew lounge at O'Hare the next morning, her navy blazer slung over her shoulder like a trophy. The day off Carl had forced on her felt like a paid vacation, a chance to sleep off the whiskey and diner grease while the protesters yelled themselves hoarse. She'd checked X before rolling out of the motel, smirking at the chaos still swirling around Flight 392. 8 million views now, but the hate was fading into noise, drowned out by a few loyal fans calling her a real one. She tossed her bag onto a bench, the clatter echoing in the mostly empty room, and poured herself a coffee from the stained pot. Suspension over. Back in the game, she thought, sipping the bitter brew. What could they do to her now? She strutted toward the gate for Flight 714 to Dallas, her heels clicking against the polished floor, ignoring the janitor mopping nearby who shot her a hard stare. Passengers milled around, some clutching coffees, others scrolling phones, but none seemed to clock her as the viral villain. Good, she mused, adjusting her scarf with a flick of her wrist. The storm was blowing over, just like she'd told Carl. She boarded the plane, nodding at the gate agent, a newbie named Tara, who barely looked up from her screen. The cabin smelled of stale air and jet fuel, a familiar comfort as Lila took her post near the galley, ready to run the show again. Who cared about a few picket signs? Across town, Naomi Brooks sat in a sleek conference room, her elbows resting on a polished oak table surrounded by city council members in crisp suits. The Atlanta skyline glittered through the windows, a stark contrast to the tension coiling in the air. She wore a charcoal blazer, her posture straight as a blade, her voice low and deliberate as she spoke. Horizon Airlines has a problem, and it's not just one flight attendant. It's a culture. We need a full audit top to bottom. The council nodded, scribbling notes, their faces tight with agreement. One man, a wiry guy with a graying beard, leaned forward. "You've got our support, Ms. Brooks. This hits close to home." Naomi's eyes flickered with something sharp, a memory of decades spent fighting battles just like this. How long would Lila stay blind to the axe she was sharpening? Back at O'Hare, Lila moved through her pre-flight checks. Her clipboard balanced on her hip as she scanned the first-class manifest. No fakes today, she thought, her lips curling into a smug grin. Carl poked his head into the galley, his tie askew, his voice gruff but softer than yesterday. "You're back, but keep it clean, Lila. Corporate sent down a memo about standards. We're doing a quick sensitivity chat after this run." She rolled her eyes, flipping a page on her clipboard. "Fine, Carl. I'll smile pretty and nod. Happy?" He grunted, rubbing his temples, and shuffled off to yell at a baggage handler. Lila chuckled, tossing the clipboard onto the counter with a satisfying thud. A slap on the wrist. Nothing more. She'd sit through their little talk and be back in the air by dinner. Was that all they had? The flight took off without a hitch, the plane slicing through thick clouds as Lila handed out drinks with a practiced smile. She caught a few passengers whispering, their eyes darting her way, but she brushed it off as leftover buzz from the video. 9 million views now, she'd seen on her last break. Big deal. She leaned against the galley sink, texting Jake between services. "Back on the bird. Carl's whining about memos. They can't touch me." His reply pinged back fast. "Legend. Show 'em who's boss." She grinned, pocketing her phone, the hum of the engines a steady pulse in her bones. She dodged the bullet, kept her wings. What else could they throw at her? But the memo wasn't just Carl's whining. It landed in Lila's email as the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, buried under a dozen spam messages about crew schedules. Subject: Flight 392 review initiated. She opened it, squinting at the tiny screen, her coffee cooling in her hand. Horizon Airlines is conducting an internal review of recent incidents to ensure compliance with company policy, it read. All stiff corporate jargon. She snorted, deleting it with a swipe. Routine nonsense, she thought, picturing some desk jockey in Atlanta typing it up to feel important. They'd poke around, find nothing, and move on. She'd seen audits before, back when a pilot got caught napping. This was no different. Or was it? The plane touched down in Dallas, the late afternoon sun baking the tarmac as passengers filed out, dragging carry-ons behind them. Lila was mid-stride, heading for the jetway, when a cop stepped into her path, his badge glinting under the harsh lights. "Lila Carter?" he asked, his voice flat, his hand resting on his belt. She froze, her gut twisting for a split second before she forced a laugh. "Yeah, that's me. What's up?" He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "Got a tip your license might be expired. Need to see it." Her laugh turned sharp, edged with irritation as she fished her ID from her purse. "Seriously? I fly planes, not drive them." The cop took the card, his eyes flicking between it and her face, his radio crackling with static. Lila crossed her arms, tapping her foot as passengers streamed past, some slowing to gawk. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice loud, enough to draw Tara's attention from the gate desk. The cop ran the ID through his scanner, the beep cutting through the noise, then handed it back with a shrug. "Checks out. You're good." Lila snatched it, her smirk returning full force. "Told you, waste of time." He nodded, tipping his hat slightly, and walked off, his boots thudding against the floor. She turned to Tara, rolling her eyes. "Can you believe that? Some idiot's prank." Did she really think it was random? She strutted out of the terminal, the Dallas heat hitting her like a wall as she hailed a cab to the crew hotel. The cop stop was a blip, a dumb hiccup she'd laugh about with Jake over beers later. She texted him as the cab wove through traffic, the city's glass towers flashing by. "Cop pulled me over for nothing. Let me go in 2 minutes. They're grasping at straws." His reply buzzed back, "LOL, you're untouchable." She grinned, leaning back against the cracked leather seat, the air conditioning rattling against her skin. She'd outsmarted the protesters, Carl, and now some trigger-happy cop. This was her lane, and she owned it. Naomi, though, wasn't grasping at straws. She stood in her Atlanta office, the council meeting adjourned, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to a contact at the FAA. "I want every record on Flight 392 pulled, every crew member's history. Start with her," she said, her voice a quiet blade slicing through the line. On her desk, a monitor streamed live footage from Dallas, the cop walking away from Lila, his body cam catching her smug grin. Naomi's assistant, Kevin, hovered nearby, a stack of files in his arms. "That was the first move, Ms. Brooks. They'll feel it soon." She nodded, her gaze locked on the screen, watching Lila disappear into the cab. "They will," she murmured, her fingers tightening around the phone. How long could Lila keep grinning when the real game was just beginning? Lila checked into the hotel, a budget joint with flickering hallway lights and a musty carpet smell. She flopped onto the bed, kicking off her shoes with a groan, her phone lighting up with a new X notification. The video was at 10 million views, but she didn't care anymore. She'd won this round, she told herself, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Carl's memo was toothless. The cop had backed off, and the protesters were just noise. She closed, her eyes, the hum of the city fading as she drifted into a shallow sleep. Her dreams filled with the roar of jet engines and her own triumphant laughter. She'd beaten them all, hadn't she? But Naomi wasn't sleeping. She sat at her desk, the city dark beyond her windows, a blueprint of Horizon's operation spread before her. Red ink marked Lila's name, a single dot in a web of lines connecting crews, routes, and policies she'd let slide too long. She traced it with a manicured nail, her mind racing 3 steps ahead. Lila thought she'd dodged a bullet, but Naomi was loading a cannon. The audit wasn't routine, the cop wasn't random, and the fight was far from over. Lila's little victory was a mirage, and the desert was about to swallow her whole. Lila Carter stood at the galley of Flight 714, mid-route from Dallas to Phoenix, her hands steady as she poured ginger ale into a plastic cup. The plane hummed at 37,000 feet, a smooth ride under a blazing afternoon sky, and she felt the groove of routine settle back into her bones. That cop stop in Dallas was a laughable hiccup, and Carl's memo was just hot air from suits who'd never worked a real day. She handed the drink to a passenger with a curt nod, her lips twitching into a half-smile. The protesters were yesterday's news, and she was back where she belonged, running this tin can like a queen. What could touch her up here? Halfway through the flight, a shudder jolted the cabin, the overhead bins rattling as the plane dipped sharply. Passengers gasped, gripping armrests, and Lila stumbled, catching herself on the counter as soda splashed across her apron. "What the hell?" she muttered, peering out the galley window at the starboard wing. Smoke trailed from the engine, thin but unmistakable, curling into the endless blue. The intercom crackled, the captain's voice tight but calm. "Folks, we've got a mechanical issue. Stay seated, we're handling it." Lila's pulse kicked up, but she straightened her spine, brushing off the spill. "Just a glitch," she told herself, grabbing a towel to mop up. She'd seen worse. The plane leveled out, but the murmurs grew louder, passengers craning necks to peek at the wing. A woman in a floral dress near the front jabbed a finger at Lila. "This your fault? You've been nothing but trouble since Atlanta." Her voice was shrill, cutting through the hum, and heads turned, eyes narrowing. Lila bristled, her jaw clenching as she marched over. "Sit down and shut up, I don't fly the damn thing," she snapped, her tone sharp enough to slice steel. The woman shrank back, but the accusation hung heavy, a spark igniting whispers down the rows. Was this really just bad luck? Minutes later, the engine coughed again, a grinding screech that sent a shiver through the fuselage. The captain diverted to an emergency landing in Albuquerque. the descent bumpy as the plane limped onto the tarmac. Emergency crews swarmed, lights flashing red against the desert dust, and passengers scrambled out, clutching bags and muttering about that rude attendant. Lila stood by the jetway, arms crossed, her uniform still damp with soda as a tow truck rumbled up. The driver, a stocky black man with a shaved head, climbed out, his eyes locking onto her with a smirk. "Heard you're famous, lady, quite a show you put on." His voice dripped with mockery, and Lila's face burned, her fists balling at her sides. "Just tow the damn plane," she growled, turning away. He chuckled, hooking the jet to his rig, but Lila wasn't waiting around. She grabbed a toolkit from the galley, her fingers trembling with defiance, and stormed to the engine herself. Passengers gawked from the terminal windows as she yanked open a panel, swearing under her breath as she tightened a loose clamp she'd spotted. Sweat beaded on her forehead, the dry heat baking her skin, but after 20 minutes, the engine sputtered back to life, a weak roar that drowned out the tow guy's laugh. She slammed the panel shut, wiping her hands on her skirt, and shot him a glare. "Told you I'd fix it. Don't need your help." He shrugged, climbing back into his truck, but his smirk lingered like a stain. Did she really think she'd won this round? The captain cleared the plane for a delayed takeoff, and Lila boarded again, her chest puffed with gritty triumph. She'd saved the day, kept the flight on track, and shut up that smug driver. Passengers grumbled as they retook their seats, but she didn't care. Strutting down the aisle with her head high, she texted Jake from the galley as the plane taxied. "Engine crapped out, fixed it myself. They can't stop me." His reply buzzed back, "Badass, you're unstoppable." She grinned, pocketing her phone, the desert shrinking below as the plane climbed. She'd beaten the breakdown, proved she was tougher than the machine. What else could they throw at her now? But the victory was a mirage. Her phone rang mid-flight, Carl's name flashing across the screen, his voice a jagged edge when she answered. "Lila, you're on probation. Someone high up filed a formal complaint about 392, and now this mess in Albuquerque? Corporate's pissed." She laughed, a harsh bark that echoed in the galley. "Probation? For what? Doing my job? Tell them to shove it, Carl." His sigh was heavy, crackling through the line. "It's not me, it's them. Keep your nose clean, or you're done." She hung up, slamming the phone onto the counter, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Snowflakes," she muttered, picturing some desk-bound exec whining about her attitude. They wouldn't dare fire her, not after. She just saved their asses, or would they? Across the country, Naomi Brooks paced her Atlanta office, a storm brewing in her steady gait. She'd just hung up with the mayor, her voice calm but lethal as she'd pushed for a deeper probe into Horizon's operations. "This isn't isolated. Mr. Mayor, it's systemic and I won't let it stand," she'd said, her words a promise carved in stone. On her desk, a live feed from Albuquerque showed Lila tinkering with the engine, her smug grin clear even through the grainy footage. Naomi's lips tightened, her fingers drumming against a folder labeled Flight Safety Reports. She'd seen the complaint go through, knew it had hit Lila like a slap, but it was just the opening shot. How long could Lila keep strutting when the real war was already underway? Lila landed in Phoenix, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the tarmac as she hauled her bag through the terminal. Her phone buzzed again, ignored this time as she headed for the crew van. She climbed in, slumping against the window, her triumph souring under Carl's warning. Probation was a joke, she told herself, just corporate flexing to appease the crybabies. She'd ride it out, same as always. The van pulled away, the city lights blurring past, but she didn't notice. The black sedan idling nearby, its driver watching her through tinted glass. He dialed a number, his voice low. "She's still cocky, Ms. Brooks. On the move now." Did Lila think she was untouchable? That night, as she sprawled across a lumpy hotel bed in Phoenix, the city's hum a dull roar outside. Something sharper cut through the quiet. A screech of metal, a shatter of glass. She bolted upright, heart slamming against her ribs, and yanked the curtains back. Her rental car, parked in the lot below, sat mangled, its tires slashed to ribbons, the windshield a spiderweb of cracks. She swore, grabbing her phone to snap a photo, her hands shaking with rage. "Damn gang kids," she spat, texting Jake, the pic. "Look what they did now. They're scared of me, huh?" He replied fast. "Cowards. You're too tough for 'em." She smirked, tossing the phone onto the nightstand, and flopped back onto the bed, her eyes drifting shut. She'd beaten the engine, dodged probation's bite, and now this. Just punks lashing out. She'd sleep easy tonight. But Naomi wasn't sleeping. In Atlanta, her office glowed late into the night, a war room of screens and files. Kevin stood by her desk, replaying the Phoenix footage, the sedan's driver visible in the shadows, a blade glinting in his hand as he carved into Lila's tires. "First the engine, now this," he said, his voice tight. Naomi nodded, her gaze fixed on the screen, Lila's car a wreckage under the sodium lights. "She thinks it's random." "Let her," she murmured, her tone cold as winter steel. She'd ordered the slash, a quiet jab to rattle Lila's cage, but it was nothing compared to what was coming. The mayor had greenlit her audit, and the FAA was digging deeper. Lila's little fix-it stunt was a pebble against the avalanche rolling her way. Lila snored softly, the motel's AC rattling in the background, her dreams a jumble of jet engines and applause. She'd outsmarted the breakdown, shrugged off Carl's threats, and laughed at the vandals. The slashed tires were a nuisance, not a warning, she told herself, her mind drifting into the haze of sleep. She was still in control, still the queen of her sky. But Naomi's shadow loomed larger, her aides report pinging her phone with every move Lila made. The trap was tightening, and Lila didn't even feel the squeeze yet. Lila Carter slumped into a folding chair at the Phoenix Crew Lounge, her uniform rumpled from a sleepless night after finding her rental car trashed. The slashed tires were a petty annoyance, she told herself, sipping a stale coffee as the morning sun streamed through grimy windows. She'd filed a police report at dawn, shrugging off the officer's bored questions with a smirk. "Just some local punks," she'd said, brushing lint off her blazer. Probation was a slap on the wrist, and that engine fix in Albuquerque had proved she was tougher than any breakdown. She scrolled X on her phone, the video now at 12 million views, and grinned at a new wave of supportive comments. "Keep fighting, girl," one read. She was still in the ring, still swinging. The lounge door burst open, and a TV crew stormed in, cameras rolling, lights blinding as a reporter in a crisp suit shoved a mic in her face. "Lila Carter, you're the flight attendant from Flight 392, right? What do you say to the racism allegations?" Her coffee slipped, splashing across her lap as she jolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. "What the? Get that out of my face," she barked, swatting at the mic, but the reporter pressed closer, his voice sharp. "Video shows you ejecting a black woman, Naomi Brooks, from first class. It's gone viral. Care to comment?" Lila's mind raced, her tongue tripping over itself. "It's edited, okay? She didn't belong there, fake ticket, I was doing my job." The camera zoomed in, catching the sweat beading on her forehead, her stammering defiance. The reporter's eyes gleamed, and he dropped a bomb. "Naomi Brooks isn't just any passenger. She's a civil rights icon, fought airline discrimination for decades. You didn't know?" Lila's jaw dropped, a laugh bubbling up, harsh and jagged. "A what? That's bullshit. She's nobody." The crew packed up fast, the reporter smirking as he muttered into his earpiece. "Got it, airing live." Lila sank back into her chair, her pulse pounding in her ears, the room spinning. "An icon?" She shook her head, texting Jake with trembling fingers. "TV ambushed me, saying she's some big deal. Lies, right?" His reply buzzed back. "No way, they're bluffing." She nodded to herself, clinging to that lifeline. This was just hype, noise to scare her. She'd laugh it off soon enough, but the noise wasn't dying down. By noon, Flight 714 was taxiing out for its next leg to Seattle, Lila back on duty, her smirk plastered on despite the ambush. The cabin buzzed with tension, passengers whispering as she moved down the aisle, their stares prickling her skin. She handed out water with a tight smile, ignoring the guy in row 10 who muttered, "That's her, the racist one. The plane lifted off and she leaned against the galley counter, her stomach twisting. Then the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we've got protesters on the ground in Seattle. Might hit turbulence. Stay buckled." Lila's smirk faltered, her fingers gripping the counter. "Protesters again?" She brushed it off, texting Carl mid-flight. "More whiners in Seattle. This is getting old." He didn't reply. The descent into Seattle was smooth until the plane broke through the clouds and Lila peered out the window, her breath catching. A mob clogged the tarmac below, signs bobbing in the wind. "Fire Lila now," and "Naomi deserves better." The captain diverted to a back runway, but the crowd shifted, spilling into a nearby access road packed with black families, kids clutching backpacks, their faces twisted with anger. As the plane rolled past, a rock sailed through the air, thunking against the fuselage, then another, a barrage pelting the metal skin. Passengers screamed, ducking low, and Lila stumbled back, her clipboard clattering to the floor. "Little brats," she spat, her voice shaking as she yanked the shade down. Was this really happening? The plane shuddered to a stop, emergency lights flashing as ground crew waved them in. But the rocks kept coming, a relentless drumbeat against the hull. Lila bolted to the jetway door, shoving it open, her chest heaving as she stepped out. The mob surged closer, held back by a thin line of airport security, their shouts a wall of sound. "Racist! Get out!" She froze, her legs jelly, then spun on her heel, darting back inside, her breath ragged. The captain met her in the galley, his face grim. "Stay out of sight, Lila. They're out for blood." She nodded, ducking low, her heart hammering as the last stone bounced off the wing. She'd escaped, hadn't she? The mob couldn't touch her up here. She slumped against the galley wall, her uniform clinging to her sweaty skin, her mind replaying the rocks, the signs, the reporter's smug face. She texted Jake again, her fingers fumbling. "Protesters threw rocks at the plane in Seattle. Insane, but I'm fine." His reply pinged, "Holy crap, you're a warrior." She forced a grin, her chest swelling with shaky pride. She'd outrun them, kept her cool while the plane took the hits. She grabbed a soda from the cart, cracking it open with a hiss, the cold fizz steadying her nerves. The mob was loud, but they'd scattered when security pushed back. She was still standing, still flying. This was her win, right? Naomi Brooks, though, wasn't scattered. She stood in her Atlanta office, a wall of monitors flickering with live feeds, one streaming the Seattle chaos in real time. Her aide, Kevin, hovered by her side, his tablet glowing with the latest X stats. 15 million views, trending worldwide under Baksh Naomi fights back. "They got it all, Ms. Brooks. Lila's meltdown, the rocks, everything," he said, his voice buzzing with adrenaline. Naomi's gaze locked on the screen, Lila's silhouette ducking back into the jetway, the mob's fury a roaring backdrop. "Good," she murmured, her tone icy and deliberate. "Let it burn." She'd lit this fire, and Kevin's camera had caught every spark, uploading it live as the world watched Lila unravel. Back in Seattle, Lila hauled her bag through the terminal, her head low, avoiding the stares of passengers trickling out behind her. The TV above the gate desk looped, the Phoenix ambush, her stammering voice echoing, "She's nobody." She winced, her stomach churning, but kept moving, her heels clicking fast against the tile. The reporter's words gnawed at her, civil rights icon, decades of fighting. She shook her head, muttering under her breath. Lies, all of it. She's just some loudmouth with a grudge. She slipped into the crew van, the driver silent as he pulled away, the city's rain-slicked streets blurring past. She'd dodged the rocks, silenced the doubters. She was still in control, wasn't she? Naomi's office hummed with late-night energy, her team dissecting every frame of the Seattle footage. Kevin zoomed in on Lila's face, her smirk fading, as the first rock hit, a crack splintering across her bravado. "She's clueless, Ms. Brooks. Thinks she's winning," he said, shaking his head. Naomi nodded, her fingers steepled, her eyes glinting with cold resolve. "She'll learn soon. Enough." She'd turned Lila's jetway stunt into a public execution, and the world was eating it up. The audit was closing in, the FAA digging deeper, and this chaos was just the appetizer. How long could Lila keep running when the sky itself was turning against her? Hey folks, this story's flying high with tension. Comment number 1 if you think Lila's arrogance is about to crash and burn. Or number 2 if you're betting Naomi's got even bigger moves up her sleeve. Should Lila keep fighting or start begging for mercy? Hit that like button if you're hooked on this showdown, and subscribe to catch every twist as Naomi turns the tables. What's brewing behind those office doors? Can Lila dodge the next blow, or is her wings-clipping moment just a heartbeat away? Stay tuned to see the storm break wide open. Lila Carter slumped against the galley counter of Flight 815, a red-eye from Seattle to Denver, her eyes bleary from the chaos in Phoenix and Seattle. The cabin lights dimmed as passengers dozed under thin blankets, the hum of the engines a steady drone at 38,000 feet. She rubbed her temples, the sting of the TV ambush and the rock-throwing mob still fresh, but she forced a smirk. She dodged the reporters, outrun the protesters, and kept her wings. Probation was a paper tiger, and that car vandalism was just petty revenge. She poured herself a cup of tepid water, the plastic cool against her palm, and muttered, "They've got nothing on me." Was she really untouchable, or just too stubborn to see the cracks? Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, Carl's name glowing on the screen. She answered with a groan, expecting another lecture, but his voice cut through like a jagged blade. "Lila, get your ass to the crew room when we land. That audit from 392, it's fast-tracked and you're the damn bullseye. Corporate's losing it." Her stomach lurched, water sloshing over her hand as she gripped the phone tighter. "They can't fire me, Carl. I fixed that engine, kept us flying," she snapped, her voice echoing in the empty galley. He sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. "It's not about the engine. It's you. They're digging deep and it's ugly." She hung up, slamming the cup onto the counter, her pulse racing. An audit. She'd laugh it off. Same as always. The plane touched down in Denver at 3 a.m., the terminal a ghost town under flickering fluorescent lights. Lila hauled her bag through the jetway, her heels dragging against the carpet, and trudged to the crew room. Carl waited there, his tie loosened, a stack of papers in his hands. Before he could speak, a woman stepped from the shadows, her suit sharp as a razor, her skin a deep chestnut that caught the light. She held a thick envelope, her voice smooth but cold. "Lila Carter, I'm Denise Powell, representing Naomi Brooks. You're being served with a discrimination lawsuit tied to Flight 392. Lila's jaw dropped, a laugh bubbling up, shrill and desperate. "A lawsuit? That's a joke, right?" Denise's eyes narrowed, unblinking. "It's no joke. Sign here." Lila snatched the papers, her hands trembling as she tore them in half, the rip echoing in the quiet room. "Shove it," she spat, tossing the scraps at Denise's feet. "She's got no case, fake ticket, end of story." Denise didn't flinch, just tucked the receipt into her briefcase with a faint smirk. "We'll see you in court, Ms. Carter." She turned on her heel, leaving Carl staring at the mess, his face pale. "You're an idiot, Lila. That's a legal document," he growled, but she waved him off, her chest heaving. "They're bluffing, Carl. They can't touch me." She stormed out, the cold Denver air biting her skin as she hailed a cab. Was this really just a bluff? She crashed at a crew hotel near the airport, the room smelling of bleach and stale smoke. She flopped onto the bed, her mind spinning, but sleep wouldn't come. The lawsuit papers flashed behind her eyelids, Denise's calm certainty gnawing at her guts. She grabbed her phone, texting Jake with shaky fingers. "Some lawyer chick served me papers, tore 'em up, total scam." His reply pinged back, "Hell yeah, they're scared of you." She grinned, tossing the phone aside, but the grin faded fast. She needed cash for a lawyer, just in case. She logged into her bank app, expecting her last paycheck, but the screen flashed red. Account frozen. Suspicious activity. Her breath hitched, her heart slamming against her ribs. What the hell? She bolted upright, dialing the bank's helpline, her voice rising with every ring. When a sleepy rep answered, she exploded. "Why's my account locked? I need my money." The rep's voice was flat, robotic. "We got a fraud alert, ma'am. Someone flagged unusual transactions." Come in tomorrow to fix it." Lila swore, hanging up with a snarl, and stormed to the hotel window, glaring at the empty parking lot. "Fraud? That's insane," she muttered, pacing the threadbare carpet. She'd fix this, same as the engine, same as the protesters. She grabbed her coat, heading for the all-night ATM across the street, her mind racing. Who dare mess with her money? The bank branch was a gray slab 2 miles away, and she marched in at dawn, her uniform wrinkled, her hair a mess. The teller, a young guy with a patchy beard, tapped at his screen, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, it's flagged, but it's legit. Looks like a glitch. Fixed now." Lila's account unlocked, her balance blinking back to normal, and she laughed, a sharp, triumphant bark. "Told you it was nothing," she said, withdrawing a stack of 20s with a flourish. She texted Jake from the cab back. "Bank tried to screw me, got it sorted. They're out of tricks." His reply buzzed, "You're a tank." She leaned back, the cash a comforting weight in her purse. She'd beaten this too, hadn't she? Naomi Brooks, though, wasn't out of tricks. She stood in the governor's mansion in Atlanta, the room thick with cigar smoke and power, her blazer crisp against the plush decor. The governor, a burly man with a thick drawl, leaned across his desk, his eyes sharp. "You want to defund Horizon routes over this, Naomi? That's a big swing." She nodded, her voice steady as granite. "It's not just one flight, Governor. It's a pattern, and Lila Carter's the face of it. We cut the rot, or it festers." He rubbed his chin, then grinned. "You've got my ear. Let's talk numbers." She smiled faintly, a predator's edge to it, knowing every word was a nail in Lila's coffin. How long could Lila keep dodging when the state itself was turning? Lila strutted into the Denver terminal later that day, her shift starting for a flight to Miami, her smirk back, in full force. She'd torn up the lawsuit, unlocked her cash, and shrugged off Carl's panic. The crew room buzzed with whispers as she passed, but she ignored them, grabbing her clipboard with a flick of her wrist. "They're all talk," she muttered, picturing Denise's smug face, Naomi's calm stare from the news. She'd seen lawsuits fizzle before, back when a passenger sued over spilled coffee. This was no different. She boarded the plane, the Miami sun waiting, her confidence a brittle shield. Was it strong enough to hold? Naomi's office hummed with late-night urgency. Her team sprawled across a conference table littered with coffee cups and legal pads. Kevin slid a report across to her, his voice low. The bank freeze worked, rattled her, but she's still cocky. FAA's got her flight logs now. Naomi scanned the pages, her eyes narrowing at Lila's name, bolded in red. "She thinks she's winning," she said, her tone cold as frost. "Let her." The governor's handshake still warmed her palm, his promise to gut Horizon's funding, a ticking bomb. The lawsuit was just the jab, the audit was the hook, and the defunding would be the knockout. Lila's little victories were dust in the wind she was brewing. Lila leaned against the galley sink mid-flight to Miami, the cabin quiet, the ocean a dark sprawl below. She cracked her knuckles, the sound sharp in the stillness, and texted Jake again. Back in the air, lawsuits a dud, banks fixed. They're done. His reply lit up her screen. "You're a legend, they can't break you." She grinned, pocketing her phone, the hum of the plane a lullaby to her ego. She'd outsmarted the lawyer, the bank, the protesters, every punch they'd thrown. She sipped a soda, the fizz sharp on her tongue, and pictured Naomi's face fading into obscurity. She'd won this round, hands down. But had she? Naomi sat alone now, her office dark save for the glow of her monitor, the Denver bank footage replaying Lila's triumphant strut. She leaned back, her chair creaking softly. Her mind a chessboard where Lila was a pawn teetering on the edge. The governor's backing, the FAA's probe, the lawsuit's weight. They were threads tightening around Lila's throat, and she didn't even feel the pull. Naomi's lips curved, a faint, lethal promise. "Sleep well, Ms. Carter," she murmured to the empty room. "You'll wake up to a different world." The system was turning, and Lila's smug little bubble was about to burst. Lila Carter sprawled across the stiff mattress in her Miami crew hotel, the ocean breeze slipping through a cracked window, carrying the faint tang of salt and exhaust. She'd landed Flight 815 from Denver without a hitch, her smirk intact despite the lawsuit papers, the bank freeze, and Carl's nagging. The torn-up legal mess was a distant laugh, and her cash was back in her pocket, a crisp stack of 20s tucked into her purse. She kicked off her loafers, the carpet rough against her feet, and texted Jake as the sun dipped low, painting the room in gold. "Miami's mine. They're out of moves." His reply buzzed back fast. "You're a brick wall, babe." She grinned, her chest swelling with gritty pride. She'd dodged every hit so far, hadn't she? The next morning, she shuffled to the lobby for coffee, her hair a messy bun, her uniform swapped for a faded tee and jeans. The clerk, a wiry guy with a sunburned nose, glanced up from his desk, his voice flat. "Carter, right? Got a notice for you." He slid an envelope across the counter, the words, "Eviction Notice," stamped in bold red. Lila's grin vanished, her fingers snatching it open as her pulse kicked up. "Due to multiple tenant complaints and external pressure, your lease at 145 Oak Street is terminated effective immediately," it read. Her apartment back in Atlanta, her sanctuary for 12 years, gone. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, and crumpled the paper into a ball. "This is crap," she muttered, storming back to her room. "Who dare pull this?" She dialed her landlord, Mr. Hensley, her voice a snarl as the line rang. He picked up, his tone clipped and nervous. "Lila, I got calls, okay? Big shot saying you're a liability, had to cut you loose." She slammed her fist against the wall, the plaster denting under her knuckles. "Big shots? That's insane. Fix this, Hensley." He stammered, then hung up, the silence a slap in her face. Her mind raced, Naomi's calm stare flashing behind her eyes, but she shoved it down. This was a coincidence, some bureaucratic glitch. She grabbed her phone, texting Jake. "Landlord's evicting me, says pressure. Total BS." His reply pinged. "They're desperate now." She nodded, pacing the room, her breath ragged. She'd find a new place. No sweat. By noon, she'd scouted a cheap motel near the Miami airport, a squat building with peeling paint and a buzzing neon sign. She checked in, hauling her bag up creaky stairs, the clerk barely glancing at her ID. "Cash up front," he grunted, and she slapped the 20s down, her smirk flickering back. "See? Easy," she muttered, tossing her stuff onto a lumpy bed. She'd outmaneuvered this too, kept her footing when they tried to knock her down. She flopped onto the mattress, the springs squeaking under her weight, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Eviction was a bump, not a fall. She'd bounce back, same as always. Was this really just a bump? Her phone shrilled an hour later, shattering the quiet, her daughter Sophie's name glowing on the screen. Lila answered with a yawn, expecting a quick catch-up, but Sophie's voice trembled, sharp with panic. "Mom, my scholarship's gone. They called this morning, said anonymous tips about your behavior tanked it." Lila bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs, the room tilting. "What? That's impossible, those bastards," she roared, her free hand balling into a fist. Sophie's sob crackled through the line. "I can't pay tuition now, Mom." "What did you do?" Lila's throat tightened, her voice dropping to a growl. "I'll fix it, Soph. Promise." She hung up, her mind a tornado, Naomi's shadow looming larger. Was this her doing? She grabbed her phone again, texting Jake with fury in her thumbs. "They killed Sophie's scholarship. Anonymous tips. This is war." His reply buzzed. "That's low. Fight back." She nodded, her jaw set as she dialed her old crew buddy Mike, a burly guy who'd flown with her for years. "Mike, I need dirt on Naomi Brooks, anything to hit back. She's screwing with my kid now," she said, her voice a low hiss. He grunted, skeptical but loyal. "I'll poke around, Lila, but this sounds big. Be careful." She hung up, pacing. The motel room, her sneakers scuffing the carpet. She'd dig up something, turn the tables. She wasn't a victim here, not yet. Across the country, Naomi Brooks sat in her Atlanta office, the skyline a dark sprawl beyond her windows, her blazer draped over a chair. She sipped a glass of water, her movements precise, as Kevin slid a report across her desk. "Landlord," caved Ms. Brooks. "She's out. And the scholarship's toast. Our contact at the university pulled it clean." Naomi nodded, her eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. "Good. Keep pushing." She'd leaned on allies, twisted arms, made Hensley and the dean see Lila as a walking liability. But that wasn't enough. She opened a laptop, her fingers flying, as she queued up fake evidence, emails linking Lila to a hate group, forged with surgical precision. How long could Lila keep swinging when the ground was crumbling? Mike called Lila back that night, his voice gruff over the motel's spotty reception. "Nada on Naomi, Lila. She's a ghost. Clean record, big name. You're chasing shadows." Lila swore, kicking the bed frame, the thud echoing in the small room. "Keep looking, Mike. She's not invincible." She hung up, her mind churning. The eviction notice and Sophie's tears a double punch to her gut. She sank onto the bed, her hands shaking, but her smirk crept back, thin and jagged. She'd found a motel, rallied Mike. She was still in the fight. They'd hit her hard, but she'd hit back harder. She'd prove Naomi was behind this, expose her game. Was she underestimating the storm? Naomi's team worked late, the office a hive of quiet chaos, screens glowing with Lila's every move. Kevin replayed motel security footage, Lila hauling, her bag up the stairs, her face a mask of defiance. "She's scrambling, Ms. Brooks. Doesn't see it yet," he said, his voice low. Naomi leaned forward, studying the grainy image, her lips a tight line. "She will." The fake emails were ready, planted in a dummy account tied to Lila's name, a ticking bomb set to detonate. She'd hit Lila's home, her kid, and now her reputation. The lawsuit was brewing, the audit closing in, and this was the next twist of the knife. Lila thought she'd dodged the worst, but Naomi was just warming up. Lila paced the motel room, the neon sign outside flickering through the blinds, casting jagged stripes across her face. She texted Sophie, her fingers steady despite the ache in her chest. "I'll fix the scholarship, Soph, don't worry." No reply came, the silence a weight she couldn't shake. She flopped onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying Hensley's stammer, Sophie's sob, Mike's dead end. She'd lost her apartment, her daughter's future was on the line, but she'd clawed back a foothold. The motel was hers, Mike was digging, and she'd beat that bank freeze. She smirked, her eyes drifting shut, the hum of Miami traffic a dull lullaby. She was still standing, still fighting. But for how long? Naomi sat alone now, her office dark save for the laptop's glow, the forged emails a masterpiece of malice. On the screen, she'd watched Lila's life unravel thread by thread, each tug a calculated strike. The landlord's eviction, the scholarship's collapse. They were personal, raw, designed to break her spirit. But the hate group trap was the real venom, a lie so vile it'd stick like tar. She closed the laptop, her reflection stark in the glass, a woman who'd fought too long to let Lila's smugness stand. "You wanted a war, Ms. Carter," she murmured, her voice a whisper in the stillness. "You've got one." The system was hers to wield, and Lila's little victories were about to choke her. Lila slept fitfully, the motel bed creaking under. Her restless turns, her dreams a tangle of jetways and courtroom gavels. She'd rallied, regrouped, kept her head above water when they'd tried to drown her. The eviction was a setback, Sophie's scholarship a gut punch, but she'd find a way, same as always. She clutched her phone, Jake's words a lifeline. "They can't break you." She believed it, her smirk a fragile armor as dawn crept through the blinds. She'd outsmarted them again, hadn't she? But Naomi's shadow stretched longer, her next move a blade Lila couldn't see coming. Lila Carter hunched over a chipped table in her Miami motel room, the neon sign outside buzzing like a trapped fly, casting a sickly green glow across the walls. She'd spent the morning on the phone with Sophie's university, barking at a registrar who'd stonewalled her with policy excuses about the lost scholarship. Her eviction still stung, the motel's mildew stench a constant reminder, but she clung to her defiance, her fingers drumming a restless beat. She'd texted Mike again, pushing him to dig deeper on Naomi Brooks, convinced there was dirt to find. "She's behind this. I know it," she'd told him, her voice a low growl. She sipped a warm soda, the fizz flat, and smirked at her reflection in the smudged mirror. They'd hit her hard, but she was still swinging. Wasn't she? A sharp knock jolted her from her thoughts, the door rattling in its flimsy frame. She opened it, bleary-eyed, to find two cops in crisp uniforms, their badges glinting under the hallway's flickering light. "Lila Carter?" the taller one asked, his voice a gravelly drawl, his hand resting on his holster. She nodded, her gut twisting as he shoved a warrant in her face. "We're searching the premises. Reports of hate group activity tied to this address." Her laugh was a jagged bark, disbelief flooding her veins. "Hate group? That's insane. I'm a flight attendant, not a damn terrorist." The cops pushed past, their boots thudding against the carpet, and began tearing through her stuff, flipping the mattress, rifling her bag. Lila stood frozen, her pulse hammering as the shorter cop pulled a stack of flyers from under the bed. Bold red letters screaming, "White Pride," across the top. Her jaw dropped, her voice rising to a shriek. "Those aren't mine! This is a setup. You planted them." The tall cop raised an eyebrow, bagging the papers with a gloved hand. "Sure, lady, you're coming with us." They cuffed her, the metal biting into her wrists, and hauled her out, the motel clerk gawking from the stairwell. She twisted, shouting, "Call Jake. Tell him it's a frame-up." But the door slammed shut, her pleas swallowed by the humid night. How could this be happening? The precinct was a blur of harsh lights and stale coffee. Lila slumped in a holding cell, her hands still cuffed as she glared at the chipped wall. She'd screamed herself hoarse, insisting it was a lie, but the cops just booked her, their faces blank. Her phone buzzed in evidence lockup, Jake's reply to her last text. "They're out of moves." A cruel joke now. After hours of stewing, Mike bailed her out, his burly frame filling the doorway as he tossed her a pack of gum. "I vouched for you, Lila. Said you're no bigot, just pissed off. They bought it for now," he grunted. She smirked, popping, a piece into her mouth, the mint sharp on her tongue. "Told you it's a scam. I'm free, Mike." Was she really free? She staggered back to the motel, the dawn sky a bruised purple over Miami's skyline, her wrists red from the cuffs. The room was trashed, her clothes strewn across the floor, but she didn't care. She'd beaten the rap, walked out when they'd tried to bury her. She texted Jake, her fingers steady despite the ache in her bones. "Cops raided me, planted hate flyers, but I'm out. They're desperate." His reply pinged. "You're a beast. They can't hold you." She grinned, flopping onto the wrecked bed, her chest swelling with shaky triumph. The arrest was a scare tactic, nothing more. She'd outsmarted them again, kept her head above water. But had she? The news hit like a freight train by noon, every TV in the Miami terminal blaring her face under a screaming headline, "Horizon flight attendant linked to white supremacist group." The motel clerk had tipped off a reporter, and the flyers, fake or not, were gospel now. Lila caught the broadcast on her phone, her stomach plummeting as the anchor's voice droned. "Lila Carter, already under fire for ejecting Naomi Brooks, now faces allegations of hate group ties." She laughed, a hollow sound, and texted, "Mike, news is calling me a racist nutjob. Total lie. I'll sue them too." He didn't reply, and her phone stayed silent, her crew buddies ghosting her one by one. Was this the end of her fight? Naomi Brooks stood at a podium in Atlanta, the press conference a sea of flashing cameras and scribbling pens, her blazer sharp against the chaos. Her voice was steady, a quiet thunder rolling through the room. Horizon Airlines must answer for a culture that tolerates discrimination. This isn't one bad apple, it's a poison tree. She didn't name Lila, didn't need to. The flyers spoke louder than words, a lie she'd crafted to perfection. Reporters shouted questions, but she stepped back, her eyes cold, knowing the world was swallowing her bait whole. Kevin lingered nearby, his tablet glowing with the live feed, Lila's name trending at 18 million hits. "She's done, Ms. Brooks," he whispered. Naomi nodded, her lips a thin line. Not yet. Lila paced the motel, her sneakers scuffing the carpet, her mind a storm of rage and desperation. She'd beaten the arrest, but the news was a guillotine, her reputation shredded in hours. She grabbed her phone, dialing Carl, her voice a snarl when he picked up. "This is a setup, Carl. Those flyers aren't mine. Tell corporate." He sighed, his tone flat. "They don't care, Lila. You're radioactive now. Stay low." She hung up, her fist slamming the table, and decided to fight back. She'd tell Naomi's aide, that wiry guy she'd seen on TV, expose this for the sham it was. She rented a beat-up sedan, her cash dwindling, and drove to Atlanta, her eyes scanning every shadow. Was she walking into a trap? She spotted Kevin late that night slipping out of a downtown coffee shop, his hoodie pulled low. Lila followed, her sedan rattling through Atlanta's back streets, her knuckles white on the wheel. She parked a block away, creeping closer on foot, her breath shallow as she watched him duck into an alley. She smirked, her pulse racing. This was her chance, her shot to flip the script. She didn't see the cop trailing her, his cruiser silent in the dark, his radio crackling with a tip from Naomi's team. She rounded the corner, ready to confront Kevin, her phone recording, her voice a whisper. "Got you now, bastard." But did she? Naomi's office glowed with midnight purpose, her team huddled over screens, the Atlanta footage streaming live from Kevin's hidden cam. Lila's silhouette crept closer, her sedan a hulking shape in the background, and Naomi's lips twitched, a rare flicker of triumph. "She's chasing ghosts," she murmured, her voice like ice over stone. The fake flyers had done their job, turned Lila into a pariah, and this tailing stunt was the cherry on top. The cop was her ace, primed to pounce, and Lila didn't even hear the footsteps. She'd walked out of that cell, but Naomi was locking her in a bigger cage, one she'd built herself. Lila crouched behind a dumpster, her phone's red light blinking, her breath fogging in the cool night air. Kevin lingered in the alley, oblivious, and she grinned, her chest swelling with jagged hope. She'd catch him, prove Naomi's game, clear her name. The arrest was a fluke, the news a lie, she'd beaten worse. She stepped forward, ready to pounce, her sneakers silent on the pavement. She was still in the fight, still clawing back control. But how long could she run when the shadows were closing in? "Hey, folks, this story's spiraling into chaos." Comment: number 1 if you think Lila's about to crash hard into Naomi's trap, or number 2 if you're rooting for her to outsmart this frame-up. Is she a fighter or a fool chasing her own tail? Smash that like button if you're gripped by this twist, and subscribe to see Lila's next desperate move. What's lurking in that alley? Will her gamble pay off, or is Naomi's web too tight to escape? Buckle up for the next wild turn. Lila Carter crouched in the shadows of an Atlanta alley, her rented sedan parked a block away, its engine still ticking from the late-night drive from Miami. The air was thick with humidity, a sour mix of garbage and asphalt clinging to her skin. As she gripped her phone, its red recording light a faint glow in the dark. She'd tailed Naomi's aide, Kevin, from that coffee shop, her pulse pounding with every step closer to proving this nightmare. The eviction, Sophie's scholarship, the hate group flyers, was Naomi's doing. She peered around the dumpster, her breath shallow, spotting Kevin's wiry frame pacing under a flickering street lamp, his hoodie pulled low. "Got you," she whispered, her smirk jagged with defiance. She'd beaten the arrest, dodged the news, and now she'd expose the puppet master. Wasn't this her moment? She edged closer, her sneakers scuffing the pavement, her phone steady as she aimed it at Kevin. He muttered into his own device, oblivious, his words lost to the night's hum. Lila's chest swelled, her mind racing. She'd catch him admitting. The frame-up, clear her name, turn this war around. She stepped out, ready to confront him, her voice a low hiss. "Hey, you little rat, spill it." But before he could turn, a roar erupted behind her, a flood of shadows bursting from the alley's mouth. A mob, faces twisted with rage, charged at her, fists raised, voices a wall of fury. "Racist, you're done." Her phone clattered to the ground as she stumbled back, her heart slamming against her ribs. What the hell was this? The first blow landed, a fist cracking against her jaw, sending her reeling into the dumpster, the metal cold and unyielding. She swung wildly, her nails clawing at air, but the mob pressed in, a tide of kicks and punches raining down. "You messed with Naomi!" a voice bellowed, and another rocketed a knee into her ribs, the air rushing from her lungs in a choked gasp. Blood trickled from her lip, hot and coppery, as she curled into a ball, her arms shielding her face. The alley spun, a blur of sneakers and snarls, but she gritted her teeth, her mind screaming. She'd survive this, crawl out, fight back. The mob relented, scattering into the dark as sirens wailed in the distance, leaving her battered but breathing. Had she escaped the worst? She dragged herself to her knees, her body a map of bruises, her uniform jacket torn at the elbow. Her phone lay cracked a few feet away, the screen dark, and she snatched it up, her hands trembling as she staggered to her sedan. Blood smeared the steering wheel as she climbed in, her breath ragged, but a shaky smirk crept onto her face. "They're scared," she muttered, spitting red onto the floor mat. She'd taken the hits, stayed alive, proof they couldn't break her. She drove to a gas station, the neon lights harsh against her swollen eyes, and cleaned up in the grimy bathroom, splashing water on her face. She'd scared them off, hadn't she? Her phone buzzed, somehow still alive. Jake's name flashing through the cracked glass. She answered, her voice a rasp. "Mob jumped me in Atlanta, beat me bloody, but I'm still here." His reply crackled, fierce and fast. "You're a damn tank, Lila. They're running now." She grinned, wincing as her split lips stretched, and leaned against the sink, the cold porcelain grounding her. She texted X from the bathroom, her thumbs sluggish but defiant. "Jumped by cowards in ATL, still standing. They're weak." The post went live, racking views as she hobbled back to the car, her chest heaving with ragged triumph. She'd taken the beating and walked away. Another win in her book. Was it really a win? The cops arrived an hour later, their cruiser rolling up to the gas station as Lila slumped in her sedan, her head throbbing. "Lila Carter?" the lead officer asked, a stocky woman with a buzz cut, her flashlight sweeping the car's interior. "Got a call about an assault? You the victim?" Lila nodded, her voice hoarse. "Yeah, but they set me up. I was tailing a guy, Naomi's lackey." The cop's brow furrowed, her partner scribbling notes. "Evidence says you started it. Witnesses saw you swing first." Lila's jaw dropped, her laugh a broken wheeze. "That's a lie. They ambushed me." The cop shrugged, cuffing her again, the metal colder this time. "Tell it downtown." The precinct was a rerun of Miami, harsh lights and sour air, but this time the charge was assault, not hate. Lila sat in a cell, her bruises pulsing, her mind replaying the alley, the mob, Kevin's shadow, the sirens. They'd twisted it, pinned it on her, but she'd fight this too. A shady lawyer, a guy Mike knew with a cheap suit and a greasy smile, got her out by dawn. The charge dropped on shaky evidence. "They've got nothing solid," he sneered, pocketing her last 20s. She smirked, limping out into the gray Atlanta morning, her chest swelling with battered pride. "Told you I'd walk," she muttered, texting Jake. "Arrested again. Beat it again. They're out of gas." His reply buzzed. Unbreakable. Had she really dodged the bullet? Naomi Brooks watched it all unfold from her Atlanta office. The skyline a dark sprawl beyond her windows, her blazer crisp despite the late hour. Kevin stood by her desk, replaying the alley footage from his hidden cam. Lila's crumpled form a stark silhouette against the dumpster. "Tipped the mob myself, Ms. Brooks. Worked like a charm," he said, his voice low with satisfaction. Naomi nodded, her eyes glinting with cold precision. "Good. She's still swinging." She'd orchestrated the attack, fed the witnesses' lies, turned Lila's tailing into a trap. The footage hit X, synced with Lila's post, and Naomi's team leaked it wider, the headline screaming, "Flight attendant attacks protesters." The union called minutes later, their rep's voice clipped. "Lila's out. No support from us." Naomi smiled faintly, a predator's edge to it. Was this the end game? Lila crashed at a cheap motel on Atlanta's outskirts, the room a twin to Miami's, peeling paint, buzzing neon, a mattress that sagged under her aching frame. She iced her ribs with a gas station bag, her phone glowing with the news. Union. Drops Carter amid assault claims. Her smirk faded, her stomach twisting as she scrolled X, her post buried under a flood of hate. 20 million views now. The mob video trending higher. She texted Carl, her fingers shaky. "Union's gone, this is rigged. Help me." He didn't reply, his silence a brick wall. She tossed the phone, her breath hitching, but forced a grin. She'd beaten the charge, walked out again. She wasn't done. Not yet. Was she? Naomi's office hummed with midnight energy, her team dissecting the fallout, screens flickering with Lila's every stumble. Kevin zoomed in on the gas station footage, Lila's bloodied smirk a stark contrast to the Union statement. "She's toast, Ms. Brooks. Mayor's on board, wants a citywide ban next," he said, his voice tight. Naomi leaned back, her chair creaking softly, her mind a chessboard where Lila's pieces were toppling fast. "She thinks she's winning," she murmured, her tone icy and deliberate. "Let her." The mob was her fist, the Union's cut, her blade, and the ban would be her hammer. Lila's little victories were ash, and the real blow was still loading. Lila lay on the motel bed, her body a throbbing wreck, her eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling. She'd survived the alley. Beaten. The arrest kept her fire burning when they'd tried to snuff it out. The Union's betrayal stung, but she'd find a way, same as always. She clutched her phone, Jake's words a lifeline. "Unbreakable," she smirked, wincing as her jaw ached, and drifted into a shallow sleep. The city's hum a dull roar outside. She'd outsmarted the mob, walked free again. She was still in the game, wasn't she? But Naomi's shadow loomed larger, her next strike a thunderclap Lila couldn't hear coming. Lila Carter slumped against the wall of her Atlanta motel room, the neon sign outside flickering a sickly pink through the blinds, casting jagged stripes across her bruised face. Her ribs ached from the mob's kicks, her wrists still raw from cuffs. But she forced a smirk, icing her swollen jaw with a melting bag of gas station cubes. She'd beaten the assault charge, walked out of that precinct with her head high, and even the Union's betrayal was just a sting she'd shrug off. She'd landed a gig that morning, a last-ditch call from a shady private jet outfit needing a fill-in attendant for a flight to Tampa. "Back in the sky," she muttered, tossing the ice aside, her voice a rasp. She'd outlasted them all, hadn't she? Her phone buzzed on the bed, the cracked screen glowing with a text from her lawyer, that greasy guy who'd sprung her yesterday. "Dumping you, Lila. Too hot to handle. Good luck." She laughed, a harsh wheeze that stung her ribs, and tossed the phone aside. "Coward," she spat, pacing the room, her sneakers scuffing the stained carpet. She didn't need him. Lawsuits were paper tigers, and she'd dodge this one too. The private jet job was her lifeline, a quick hop to Tampa, cash under the table. She grabbed her bag, the motel's mildew stench clinging to her clothes, and headed for the airstrip, her smirk flickering back. She was still flying, still fighting. Wasn't she? The jet was a sleek bird, parked at a private hangar on Atlanta's edge, its chrome skin glinting under the noon sun. Lila boarded, her uniform swapped for a borrowed blazer, her hair pulled into a messy bun. The pilot, a grizzled guy named Hank, grunted a greeting, barely glancing at her as she prepped the cabin. "Heard your trouble, Carter. Keep it quiet," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. She smirked, stocking the bar with mini bottles. "Trouble's my middle name, but I'm golden today." The clients, a trio of loudmouth execs, piled in their suits wrinkled from a late night, and the jet took off, slicing through the clouds. She served drinks with a tight smile, her chest swelling with gritty pride. She'd clawed back a win, hadn't she? But Naomi Brooks wasn't resting. In her Atlanta office, her team huddled over a bank of screens, their fingers flying across keyboards as they hacked into the jet company's system. Kevin leaned over a monitor, his eyes narrowed as lines of code scrolled past. "Got it, Ms. Brooks. Her hire's live on their server," he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. Naomi nodded, her blazer crisp against the chair, her gaze locked on a live feed of Lila pouring gin in the jet's cabin. "Leak it," she murmured, her tone cold as steel. Within minutes, the company's client list pinged with an alert. Lila Carter. Viral racist. Now serving your flight. The execs' phones buzzed mid-air, their faces twisting as they scrolled the news. Was this the end of her rope? Lila caught the shift, the execs' whispers growing sharp, their stares slicing through her like knives. "Hey, isn't that the chick from the video?" one muttered, a beefy guy with a red tie, his gin sloshing as he pointed. She froze, her tray trembling, but forced a laugh. "You're seeing things. Enjoy your drink," she said, her voice thin. The jet hit turbulence, the cabin jolting, and Red Tie stood, his face flushed. "No way, it's her! I'm not flying with this bigot!" The others joined in, shouting for Hank to land, their voices a rising storm. Lila's pulse raced, her smirk crumbling as she backed toward the galley. "Calm down, it's a mistake," she snapped. But the execs weren't listening. Hank's voice crackled over the intercom, gruff and final. "Emergency landing in Orlando. Client's orders." The jet banked hard, diving toward the tarmac, and Lila gripped the counter, her knees buckling as the execs glared. They deplaned. In a fury, the company owner waiting at the gate, his face a mask of rage. "You're fired, Carter. Clients bailed. Cost me 50 grand, he snarled, shoving her bag at her. She stumbled back, her breath hitching, but lifted her chin. "Screw you, I'll find another gig," she muttered, slinging the bag over her shoulder. She'd lost the job, but she'd walk away, keep swinging. Could she really keep going? The blow landed harder that afternoon, a citywide email from Atlanta's mayor hitting her inbox as she trudged to a bus stop, her cash nearly gone. Due to public safety concerns, Lila Carter is banned from all Horizon Airlines employment and private aviation roles within city limits, it read, stamped with official weight. She stared at the screen, her stomach plummeting, her laugh a broken wheeze. "Public safety? That's a joke," she muttered, deleting it with a swipe. She'd beaten worse: eviction, arrests, the union's cut. This was just another hurdle. She'd find a way, same as always. But was there a way left? Her phone rang as she slumped onto a bench, the Miami heat baking her skin, Sophie's name glowing through the cracks. She answered, bracing for tears, but her daughter's voice was ice. "Mom, I saw the news. Hate groups, assaults. You're toxic. I'm done," Sophie said, her words a blade twisting in Lila's gut. "Soph, it's lies. I'm fighting for us," she pleaded, her voice cracking, but the line went dead. Sophie's silence a wall she couldn't breach. Lila's hands shook, her chest heaving as she texted Jake. "Sophie disowned me. Naomi's killing me." His reply was slow, hesitant. "Hang in there." She stared at the screen, her smirk gone, her world shrinking. Was this the breaking point? She dragged herself to the motel, her steps heavy, the neon sign a mocking buzz overhead. Carl called as she fumbled with the key, his voice a weary growl. "Lila, it's over. Corporate's done. The mayor's ban's ironclad. I can't help you." She froze, the door half open, her breath shallow. "Carl, you owe me. Fight this," she snapped, but he cut her off. "She's too big, Lila. Naomi's untouchable." He hung up, and she stumbled inside. The room, spinning as she sank onto the bed. "Too big," she muttered, her fists clenching. She'd confront Naomi herself, expose her, end this. She wasn't finished, not yet. Naomi Brooks stood in her office, the Atlanta dusk painting the walls in deep amber, her blazer draped over a chair as she reviewed the mayor's ban decree. Kevin hovered nearby, his tablet glowing with the jet company's collapse, clients boycotting in droves. "She's got nothing left, Ms. Brooks. House is next," he said, his voice low. Naomi nodded, her eyes glinting with cold resolve. "Push it through." She'd hacked the jet gig, turned the mayor, severed Sophie's tie, each strike a hammer blow to Lila's crumbling empire. The foreclosure was cued, a final gut punch Lila wouldn't see coming. How long could she keep standing when every pillar fell? Lila paced the motel, her phone dead now, her cash a thin wad in her pocket. She'd lost the jet job, her daughter, her union, her career. Each hit a sledgehammer to her pride. But she'd confront Carl again, beg if she had to, find a crack in Naomi's armor. She texted him from a burner she'd grabbed at the gas station, her fingers trembling. "Meet me, Carl. We can fix this." No reply came, his silence a tombstone on her hopes. She sank onto the mattress, her breath hitching, but forced a grin. She'd clawed back before, found that jet gig when the world turned. She'd do it. Again. Wouldn't she? Naomi's team worked late, the office a hum of screens and whispers, the foreclosure notice flashing on a monitor. 145 Oak Street, Lila's last anchor, set to vanish. Kevin replayed the Orlando footage, Lila's defiance, fading as the exec stormed off, her ban a death knell echoing through the news. "She's unraveling, Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice tight. Naomi leaned back, her chair creaking, her mind a battlefield where Lila's last stand was crumbling. "She's not done fighting," she murmured, her tone a quiet storm. "But she will be." The foreclosure was the next domino, and Lila's vow to confront her was a spark Naomi would snuff out. Lila lay on the bed, her body a wreck, her eyes tracing the ceiling's stains. She'd lost everything. Home, Sophie, her, wings. But she'd face Naomi, force the truth, reclaim her life. She clutched the burner, Carl's silence a weight, but her smirk flickered back, thin and desperate. She'd beaten the mob, walked from jail, found that jet when the union cut her loose. She wasn't broken, not yet. She'd rise again, same as always. But could she rise when the ground itself was gone? Lila Carter staggered through the Atlanta streets, her sneakers crunching gravel under a gray dawn sky, her burner phone a dead weight in her pocket. She'd lost her motel room that morning, the clerk tossing her bag out when her last 20s ran dry, her eviction and Sophie's silence still raw wounds. Her bruises throbbed from the mob's attack, her career a smoking ruin after the mayor's ban. But she gripped a shred of defiance, her jaw set as she headed for City Hall. She'd crashed there once, years back, during a union rally. Today, she'd storm in, confront Naomi Brooks at her own game, expose the lies that had torched her life. She'd beaten worse, hadn't she? The council chamber loomed ahead, a squat brick building with flags snapping in the wind, its doors propped, open for a public session. Lila slipped inside, her borrowed jacket torn at the sleeve, her hair a wild tangle framing her swollen face. The room buzzed with suits and reporters, a long table at the front where council members shuffled papers under harsh lights. Naomi stood at a podium, her blazer sharp, her voice a steady blade cutting through the hum. "Horizon Airlines, failures demand reform. This bill, named for my ordeal on Flight 392, will root out discrimination," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd, missing Lila lurking by the back wall. Lila's pulse raced, her fists clenching. She'd end this now. She shoved through the crowd, her voice a ragged roar as she reached the aisle. "You're a liar, Naomi. You framed me. Fake flyers, mob attacks, all of it." Heads whipped, around, gasps rippling through the room as cameras swung her way, live streaming her outburst to millions. Naomi's gaze locked onto her, calm and unyielding, her lips a thin line. "Ms. Carter, you're interrupting a public proceeding," she said, her tone ice-cold. But Lila pressed forward, her breath heaving. "You ruined me. My home, my kid, my job. Tell them the truth." The council chair banged a gavel, shouting for order, but Lila's words echoed, a desperate salvo in a war she'd already lost. Was this her last stand? Security lunged. 2 burly guards grabbing her arms, but Lila thrashed, her elbows flailing as she screamed. "She's a monster. She set me up." The crowd erupted, phones filming every kick, every curse, painting her as unhinged, a wild animal clawing at Naomi's composure. A taser crackled, its prongs biting into her side, and she crumpled, her body jerking on the polished floor, her vision blurring as the guards dragged her out. Pain seared through her, but her mind clung to defiance. She'd made them see, forced Naomi to flinch. The doors slammed shut, the chamber's hum fading, and she smirked through the agony. She'd rattled her, hadn't she? They hauled her to a holding cell downtown. The concrete cold against her back as she slumped on a bench, her breath ragged, her taser burns pulsing under torn fabric. The cop who'd cuffed her, a lanky guy with a buzz cut, tossed her a water bottle, his voice flat. "Disrupting a council meeting. Big mistake, lady." She laughed, a broken wheeze, and sipped the water, her hands trembling. "She's the mistake. I showed them." He shrugged, locking the cell, and left her staring at the bars, her mind replaying Naomi's unflinching stare. She'd crashed the meeting, screamed the truth. Someone had to believe her. Did they? Naomi visited hours later, her heels clicking. Against the precinct floor, her blazer swapped for a sleek coat as she stood outside the bars. The guard stepped aside and she faced Lila, her presence a quiet storm filling the cramped space. "You've got one chance, Ms. Carter," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "Confess publicly, admit your actions on 392, or I push hate crime charges from those flyers. Your choice." Lila's jaw dropped, her laugh a jagged shard. "Confess? You planted that crap, I'll die first." Naomi's eyes narrowed, a flicker of steel beneath her calm. "Then you'll face the consequences." She turned, leaving, Lila seething, her fist slamming the bench. "You won't win, bitch!" she shouted. But Naomi's footsteps faded, her silence a heavier blow than words. The precinct buzzed with late-night activity, cops shuffling papers as Lila stewed, her mind a tornado of rage and desperation. She'd refused Naomi's deal, kept her fire alive. She'd fight this in court, prove the setup, claw her way back. Her burner buzzed, a miracle it still worked, Jake's text glowing through the cracks. "Heard you stormed City Hall. Legend." She smirked, her chest swelling with battered pride, and texted back, "Yeah, gave her hell. Out soon." The lawyer had flaked, but she'd find another. Beat this rap like the others. A guard unlocked the cell at dawn, her bail posted by some ex-follower who'd seen the live stream, a scruffy kid with a Lila Lives shirt. She limped out, her grin, thin but fierce. She'd walked again, hadn't she? She crashed at a Fleabag motel on Atlanta's fringe, her cash gone, the kid's $20 buying her a night on a sagging cot. She showered, the hot water stinging her burns, and plotted her escape. She'd flee north, maybe Charlotte, start over where Naomi's reach couldn't touch her. She rented a junker car with her last credit card, a rust bucket with a coughing engine, and packed her bag, her movements jerky but determined. She'd beaten the taser, refused the deal, walked free. Naomi couldn't stop her now. She climbed into the driver's seat, the engine sputtering to life, and peeled out, the city shrinking in her rear view. "See ya, suckers," she muttered, her smirk a fragile shield. Was this freedom? Naomi Brooks sat in her office, the Atlanta night a dark sprawl beyond her windows, her coat draped over a chair as she watched the council footage replay. Lila's outburst looped, her wild screams a stark contrast to Naomi's steady voice, the livestream hitting 25 million views. Kevin stood by her desk, his tablet glowing with the precinct report. "She's out on bail, Ms. Brooks. Took the car. Trackers live," he said, his voice low. Naomi nodded, her eyes glinting, with cold precision. "She thinks she's running," she murmured, her tone a quiet blade. She'd offered the deal to watch Lila squirm, knowing she'd refuse. The trap was already set, the car a ticking bomb Lila couldn't see. Lila sped through the suburbs, the junker rattling over potholes, her hands tight on the wheel as the city lights faded. She'd crashed the meeting, faced Naomi, kept her spine straight when they'd tried to break it. The taser was a jolt, the cell a cage, but she'd walked out, same as always. She'd lost her home, Sophie, her wings, but she'd start fresh, rebuild from nothing. Jake's text buzzed again. "You're a warrior." She grinned, the wind whistling through a cracked window, her chest heaving with ragged hope. She'd outsmarted them all, slipped their grasp. The highway stretched ahead, a dark ribbon promising escape. Did she really believe she'd won? Naomi's team huddled in the office, screens flickering with the tracker's signal, a red dot pulsing. As Lila's car barreled north, Kevin replayed the council chaos, Lila's crumpled form a stark silhouette against the guards, her bail a fleeting gasp before the noose tightened. "She's got no clue, Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice tight. Naomi leaned forward, her fingers steepled, her mind a battlefield where Lila's last move was a stumble into checkmate. She never did. she murmured, her tone icy and final. The deal was a feint, the bail a lure. The real blow was wired into that rust bucket, and Lila was driving straight into it. Lila pushed the gas harder, the engine groaning, her eyes scanning the empty road, her smirk a thin thread holding her together. She'd faced Naomi head-on, spat in her face, kept her fire when they'd tried to douse it. The motel was behind her, the cell a memory. She'd beaten the odds, same as always. She cranked the radio, static crackling through a country tune, and laughed, a raw, desperate sound. "I'm gone, Naomi," she muttered, the horizon a faint glow ahead. She'd start over, rise again, prove them wrong. But how long could she run when the trap was already sprung? Lila Carter gripped the steering wheel of her rented junker, the rust bucket's engine groaning as she tore down a deserted Georgia highway, the Atlanta skyline a fading smudge in her rearview mirror. The night was thick, stars swallowed by a shroud of clouds, the air whistling through a cracked window with a bite of early spring chill. She'd crashed Naomi Brooks' council meeting hours ago, screamed her truth to a room of suits, taken a taser jolt, and walked out of that cell, on a stranger's bail. Her body ached, bruises from the mob, burns from the prongs, but her smirk held firm, a jagged edge of defiance as she floored the gas. She'd lost her home, her daughter Sophie, her wings, but she'd slip Naomi's grasp, head north to Charlotte, start fresh. "You're done, Naomi," she muttered, her voice a rasp over the radio's static hiss. She'd beaten the odds again, hadn't she? The highway stretched endless, a ribbon of cracked asphalt flanked by pine trees, their shadows swaying in her headlights. She cranked the wheel, weaving past a sluggish truck, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. The burner phone sat dead in her lap, its battery drained after Jake's last text. "You're a warrior," she laughed, a raw, triumphant sound, the wind tugging at her tangled hair. She'd faced Naomi head-on, spat in her face, and now she was free. The road her lifeline. The motel, the precinct, the mayor's ban. They were chains she'd snapped, one by one. She'd rebuild, prove them wrong, rise from the ashes like always. Wasn't this her escape? The car shuddered, a faint jolt under her seat, but she ignored it, chalking it up to the junker's age. She punched the radio harder, static giving way to a twangy guitar riff, her foot heavy on the pedal as the speedometer climbed past 80. The horizon glowed faintly, a promise of dawn, and she pictured a new life. Maybe a bar gig, something off the books, far from Naomi's reach. She'd outsmarted the mob, the cops, the council, every trap they'd set. Her chest swelled, her smirk widening as she leaned into the seat, the leather cracked against her back. "I'm gone," she whispered. The words a vow to the empty road, but then the jolt came again, sharper, a rumble deep in the chassis. Her smirk faltered, her eyes flicking to the dashboard, but no lights flared, no warnings blinked. She gripped the wheel tighter, her knuckles white, and muttered, "Come on, you piece of junk." The rumble grew, a growl vibrating through her bones, and before she could brake, the world exploded. A deafening boom tore through the car, flames erupting from the hood, the windshield shattering in a hail of glass. Her scream choked off as the blast flung her forward, the seatbelt snapping taut, her head slamming the wheel. Fire swallowed the junker, a roaring beast consuming metal and flesh, the highway lighting up in a hellish glow. Lila's body slumped, her smirk erased, her fight snuffed out in a heartbeat. The wreckage burned, a twisted pyre spitting sparks into the night, the pines catching glints of orange as the flames danced. A trucker a mile back slammed his brakes, his CB radio crackling with panic as he dialed 911, his voice trembling. Explosion. "On I-85, car's gone. Someone's in there." Sirens wailed in the distance, too late to matter, the fire chewing through what was left of Lila's escape. The highway turned chaos, cops cordoning off the smoldering heap, their flashlights sweeping a scene of melted rubber and charred steel. News vans rolled up by morning, their cameras hungry for the scoop, the headline already forming. "Racist. Flight attendant dies in fiery crash." Naomi Brooks watched it unfold from her Atlanta office, the skyline a dark sprawl beyond her windows, her coat draped over a chair as dawn crept in. A wall of screens flickered, one streaming the highway. Carnage Live, the flames a vivid smear against the gray. Kevin stood by her desk, his tablet glowing with the tracker's last ping. Right where the bomb had blown, a device he'd planted under her orders, wired to detonate when Lila hit 60 miles out. "It's done, Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice low, a mix of awe and unease. Naomi nodded, her eyes glinting with cold triumph, her lips a thin line. "Justice served," she murmured, her tone a quiet blade slicing the silence. The news hit fast, channels looping the wreckage, pundits spinning tales of Lila's fugitive end. Lila Carter, infamous for ejecting Naomi Brooks from Flight 392, perished in a mysterious explosion. One anchor droned, her face grim. No survivors, cause unknown. X erupted 28 million views in hours, the mob's cheers drowning out the few mourners. Jake's lone post, RIP Warrior, buried under a flood of good riddance. Naomi's press conference aired next, her blazer sharp, her voice steady as she stood at that podium again. This tragedy underscores the need for reform. The Brooks bill passes today, honoring a fight for equity. The crowd roared approval, her legacy cemented, Lila a footnote in the blaze. But the story wasn't over. A hidden camera in the wreckage, a tiny lens Kevin had rigged beside the bomb, streamed live to a private server, its feed crackling through Naomi's office. The audio kicked in mid-blast, Lila's scream cut short, then Naomi's voice, pre-recorded, echoing through the static. "Justice served." The team froze, Kevin's tablet slipping in his grip, his face paling as he stared at her. "Ms. Brooks, that's public?" he stammered, but she waved him off, her gaze locked on the screen. The flames a mirror to her resolve. "Let them hear," she said, her tone unyielding. The world saw a martyr's victory, not a murderer's hand, except for those who dig deeper. Sophie Carter watched it all from a dorm room in Miami, her laptop glowing in the dark, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She'd cut Lila off days ago, her voice cold on that last call. But now she sat rigid, the news replaying her mother's end, Naomi's words a haunting echo. Her phone buzzed, an email from an insurance agent she didn't recognize. Policy payout confirmed, $200,000. Beneficiary, Sophie Carter. Her breath hitched, her hands trembling as she scrolled the fine print. Lila's life insurance, a secret kept from the chaos now hers. She'd flipped, hadn't she? A call log blinked on her screen, a hidden contact. NB. Naomi Brooks. Flashback to a week ago. Sophie in a quiet cafe, Naomi across from her, blazer swapped for a sweater, her voice soft but firm. "Your mother's lost, Sophie. Help me end this, and you'll be free," she'd said, sliding a contract across the table. Sophie had hesitated, her pen hovering, Lila's face flashing, her rants, her slurs, her ruin. She'd signed, tears smudging the ink, a deal to feed Naomi tips, to turn on the woman who'd raised her. Now the payout landed, her betrayal a silent blade that had guided Lila to that highway, to that bomb. She stared at the screen. Naomi's justice served. A whisper in her ears and sobbed. Her victory a hollow ache. Naomi's office hummed with morning light, her team dispersed, the screens dark save for one. The wreckage feed, looping silently. Kevin lingered, his voice tight. "Sophie's paid, Ms. Brooks. She's out of the picture." Naomi nodded, her fingers tracing a framed photo on her desk, a younger her marching with civil rights giants, her eyes fierce. "She did what she had to," she murmured, her tone a mix of steel and sorrow. The Brooks bill passed hours later, a unanimous vote. Horizon's roots slashed, its culture gutted, a triumph born from Lila's ashes. Naomi stood at her window, the city sprawling below, her legacy a tower built on a grave. Lila's death was mourned by none, her name a curse on X, her fight a ghost story fading fast. Jake vanished, his texts unanswered, the Lila Lives kid melting into the crowd. The wreckage cooled, cops scratching heads over the blast. Gas, leak, they'd rule. too tidy to question. But Sophie knew, her dorm a prison of guilt, the payout a blood-stained lifeline. She'd flipped, fed Naomi the moves, Lila's tailing, her flight, leading her to that car, that bomb. She stared at the insurance check, her mother's last gift, and whispered, "I'm sorry," her voice breaking. Had she won freedom or sold her soul? Naomi sat alone now, her office a cathedral of quiet, the photo in her hands a weight of decades. She'd crushed Lila, turned her own daughter against her, lit the fuse that ended her reign. The world cheered. A hero, not a killer. Her justice a mask for vengeance. She'd fought for equity, torn down a system. But this was personal, a scar carved deep. She set the photo down, her reflection stark in the glass. A woman who'd won by losing nothing. "It's over," she murmured, the city's hum a dull hymn to her triumph. Lila was gone, Sophie broken, the bill law. Was this justice, or just the end? Sophie packed her dorm, the check cashed, her bags light as she fled Miami, her mother's ghost a shadow she couldn't shake. Naomi's voice lingered. Justice served, a mantra that haunted her steps. The world moved on. Horizon, reformed, Lila's name a whisper in the wind. Naomi stood at her podium days later, the bills signing a victory lap, her eyes distant as cameras flashed. She'd flipped the script, burned Lila's world, secured her mark. But in Sophie's dorm, an unsent letter lay crumpled. "Mom, I didn't mean it." A confession drowned by the blast. The story closed, a shocking twist of betrayal and fire, leaving only echoes in its wake. This gripping tale unravels a brutal lesson about the consequences of unchecked prejudice and the power of resilience. Lila Carter's downfall stems from her refusal to question her biases, assuming Naomi Brooks didn't belong in first class based solely on appearance. Her arrogance fueled a cascade of missteps, dismissing Naomi's calm authority, mocking protesters, and clinging to a warped sense of victory, blinding her to the systemic forces she'd provoked. Naomi, a civil rights titan turned CEO, wields her influence not just to survive, but to dismantle the very culture Lila embodied, showing that true strength lies in strategic patience, not loud defiance. The story hammers home that racism isn't just personal. It's a web woven into institutions, and ignoring it can ignite a fire that consumes everything. Sophie's betrayal adds a gut-wrenching twist. Family ties can fray under the weight of moral choices, revealing how deep prejudice cuts. Lila's death in a fiery explosion, orchestrated by Naomi, isn't just revenge. It's a stark warning that actions ripple far beyond intent, and justice can wear a ruthless face. Yet, Naomi's victory isn't flawless. Her hands are stained, raising the question of where justice ends and vengeance begins. The lesson: assumptions can bury you, resilience can rebuild you, but power decides the grave. So, what's your takeaway? Did Lila deserve her fate, or did Naomi cross a line? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Number 1, if you think prejudice sealed Lila's doom. Number 2, if Naomi's justice went too far. Hit like if this story shook you, subscribe for more raw tales of reckoning, and share to spark a conversation. Thanks for riding this wild journey with us. Here's to facing our shadows and building a fairer sky ahead.